Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. The rarest personality type, why succeeding late is by design. Today, we're going to address that heavy, quiet certainty you've probably felt while watching literally everyone else effortlessly hit those traditional life milestones. You know exactly the feeling I'm talking about, right? You look around and everyone else just seemed to figure it out so early on. They picked their careers, they built relationships, they moved forward with this confidence that looked entirely effortless. And meanwhile, well, you might have just stood there, watching, feeling something you couldn't quite put your finger on. But as we're going to see today, what you've been experiencing absolutely isn't a failure to launch, it's actually a deeply complex psychological design.
So let's speak directly to that feeling for a second. That constant wandering and hesitation. It's that sense that you aren't exactly jealous of other people, but you simply recognize that their path, yeah, it's for sure not yours. You hesitate, you start things, you stop them, and you just watch the years roll by while the people around you accumulate all the classic markers of a well-built life. Yet somewhere deep underneath all of that wandering, there's a voice you can't fully silence that keeps telling you, you are not behind, you just aren't ready yet.
And this core difference is honestly a real game changer. Take the fast path, for instance. Most people adapt super quickly by just absorbing the world's timelines. They essentially copy-paste values, goals, and ambitions from society. Now, sure, that produces early confidence, but it almost always leaves them with shallow foundations. But then look at the rare path. The rare personality has an inner world that is just way too loud and way too complex for that kind of early adaptation. Your thoughts, your emotions, your intuitions, they all collide at once with an intensity most people will literally never experience. Because your inner world is so much louder than the outer one, just blindly becoming what society asks you to become is pretty much impossible.
Enter the legendary psychologist Carl Jung. He spent decades studying the human mind and figured out that some personalities are simply built for depth over speed. He called this wandering path individuation. It's a psychological process that doesn't unfold in a straight, neat little line. Instead, it spirals inward to build immense depth before it ever attempts to expand outward.
So what does this mean?
It proves that your delay isn't a glitch or a failure. It's literally a structural design for genuine depth. Forcing someone who is built for this path into a premature cookie-cutter identity doesn't produce success. Actually, it just produces a fracture.
Part 1. Incubation, not stagnation.
Let's see how this builds, especially during your 20s. Because wow, the painful contrast during that decade makes you feel entirely stuck while everyone else is gaining visible momentum. But when you pause to reflect on this incredibly powerful observation from Jung, you start to realize something. What looked like a failure to launch was actually vital psychological incubation. Your forming self was being protected. Your psyche was straight up refusing false alignment. It recognized that becoming what everyone else needed you to be would require abandoning something you just couldn't afford to lose.
While everyone else was busy building their outward social lives, you were building an internal psychological structure. You were unconsciously grappling with these massive, heavy questions that most people don't even think to confront until they hit a full-blown midlife crisis. Questions like, who am I, actually? What part of my beliefs are genuinely mine? What was just handed to me? And what am I finally willing to stop pretending about? Now, these questions will absolutely slow you down in your 20s, for sure. But they are exactly what end up saving you later on.
So the payoff here is totally clear when you compare the outcomes. Those folks on the fast path, they very often collapse inwardly later in life. Why? Because they built their whole house on a borrowed foundation. They hit midlife with this terrible, hollow feeling that the life they built is the right shape, but totally the wrong fit. You, on the rare path, pay a completely different kind of price. You basically pay the price of confusion up front to guarantee lasting stability later. Yeah, you pay in wandering and loneliness early on, but you don't collapse down the line because your foundation is 100% your own.
Which brings us to part 2, the burden of consciousness.
Let's be completely honest for a second. This deep inner building comes with a really isolating cost, which Jung referred to as the burden of consciousness. You see right through the illusions, the social games, the empty goals other people chase with such intense conviction. You see through the whole shebang. And because you see that massive gap between what people say and what they actually mean, it becomes incredibly complicated to participate in a game you just don't believe in. I mean, how do you perform enthusiasm for a life that feels totally hollow on the inside? You can't, so you pull back. And unfortunately, that withdrawal is almost always mistakenly labeled by others as passivity or a lack of ambition.
Now, what's genuinely fascinating is how accurately this timeline maps out the journey. It shows that your psyche actively sabotages external success if it threatens your developing inner integrity. Just look at this progression. You have the hesitation and suffocation of the early 20s, which peaks into this intense structural loneliness by your late 20s, and finally leads to a massive shift in emergence in your mid-30s. Your soul was never broken during those early years. Actually, scratch that. It was just flat out refusing to cooperate with something that wasn't true to you.
We really need to pause here because this is vital. For this specific personality type, feeling invisible or unreachable, even when you're in an intimate relationship, is not an accident. It's structural. Your inner complexity makes shallow connections feel way worse than having no connection at all. You can literally feel like an alien even when you're surrounded by people who genuinely like you, simply because what you're carrying around inside doesn't easily translate into everyday small talk.
This structural loneliness usually peaks right at that critical transition between your late 20s and early 30s, forcing a major breaking point. You basically have two choices. You can surrender. You can numb yourself, conform just for the sweet relief of finally fitting in, and pay for it with a lifelong shadow of bitter resentment toward the person you allowed yourself to become. Or you can endure. You can stop the race, listen to that inner voice, and allow your real formation to finally begin.
And that leads us to part 3. The late shift. If you choose to endure that intense loneliness without throwing in the towel, somewhere in your mid-30s, something incredible happens. You shift into this undeniable groundedness. Jung believed this is when the rare personality truly enters life. And this emergence, it doesn't arrive with loud fanfare or fireworks. It's more of a quiet, internal settling. Crystal clarity begins to replace the anxiety that used to be so constant you didn't even notice it anymore. Solid self-trust replaces that endless, exhausting comparison with your peers. And real depth completely replaces the urgency to appear like you're somewhere you aren't. This isn't your standard run-of-the-mill confidence. It is a quiet, durable coherence where you finally stop asking who you should be and just start actually inhabiting who you are.
Because your identity was forged through years of unseen heavy lifting in the dark, rather than just borrowed from society, your emergence is incredibly powerful. When you finally speak, your words carry undeniable weight because absolutely nothing is wasted. You literally change the energy of a room just by walking into it. Your decisions become remarkably precise because you're making them from a place of deep alignment, not a place of panic or anxiety. You have essentially stopped needing to fit into any particular box, and let me tell you, that shift changes absolutely everything.
I want you to really let this sink in. The standard, fast-paced timeline that society pushes, it's actually a threat to your depth. It was literally built for a completely different kind of person. It's for people who build their identity by just absorbing the world rather than questioning it. But for you, speed is a direct threat to something vastly more important.
All those years that looked like aimless, wasted wandering from the outside, they were rigorous, necessary preparation. You flat out refused to sacrifice depth for speed. You refused to trade your truth just to get a pat on the back from society. And because of that, the success that eventually comes from this path doesn't rot from the inside out. It expresses exactly who you are, allowing you to feel something that almost no one else ever gets to feel. That profound, peaceful certainty that your life finally and truly belongs to you.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this one final crucial thought. You are not late. You might just be early for a completely different kind of life. The kind of life that can only truly begin once you stop trying to be anyone other than exactly who you are. So, what part of this journey resonates most deeply with you? Which part of this have you been living through without quite having the words to explain it? Keep that thought in mind, trust your own unique schedule, and keep building that incredible depth.